It's recording. Perfect. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We'll just wait a few more minutes for people to roll in, and we'll get started shortly.
Maybe give it a couple more minutes and we should be on our way. Okay, I think we get started. Thanks for joining, everybody. The topic of today's tutorial is how you can use our API to build dynamic experiences. So just a brief overview of what we'll talk about. Hopefully we'll start with something really simple, just authentication, getting the basics right, what resources you have available, and how they all interact with each other, and how they're organized. The different ways of creating clips and the different options you have and what you should use. We'll dive a little bit into SSML and then go into voice creation and the options you have there. And then we'll put it together with an Alexa skill and tell you how it comes together. Yeah, let's get started. So authentication. It's really straightforward. When you go into your account on the website, you will see a API button on the top right under your name or your email. When you click API, you'll see an API token. Every request that you send over just needs to have these headers. Well, at least the authorization header. The content type is typically always application/JSON unless otherwise indicated in the documentation. Before I continue on, if you have any questions throughout this tutorial, feel free to write it down in the Q&A, and we will get around to it sometimes in between and sometimes afterwards. In terms of resources, there are 3 available to you that you will mostly interact with. The first is a project. So a project is an organized collection of voice clips. Because we're providing a REST API, you could do some common verbs with each resource. So you can get all of them. You can get a single one of them, or you can create a project. Similarly with a clip, which lives inside a project, you can get them all, get one of them, or create a clip, and which we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Clips live inside projects. And the nice thing about that hierarchy is that you can share projects with certain individuals. So say you're working on a, I don't know, you're an agency and you're working on a project. You can actually share that project with another Resemble account, and they only have access to things that are within that project. And they also have API access to that project, but nothing else in your account is visible to them. And the third resource is voice. These are obviously what you're creating the clips with. You can create them, you can fetch them all, and you can also update them with more data. So in terms of clips, there are three main ways of creating these clips. The first is async. The idea here is that you make a request, it goes into this queue, and it gets processed as it goes along. Typically, this could take anywhere from 2 to 10 seconds. And we recommend this for any content that is longer than a tweet, so 280 characters. If the content that you're generating is longer than a tweet, you typically want to be using an async approach anyways, rather than the synchronous approach. This is great for applications where, again, you're generating something for like an audiobook or like a text-to-speech application that doesn't require real-time generation, or you're just making assets to put into a game, etc. The next is sync. So obviously with the difference between synchronous and asynchronous, the synchronous happens in real time. Typically, this can take anywhere from 600 milliseconds to 3 seconds. This is in sublinear time. So what that means is for a clip that you're generating that is about 5 seconds long, you're approximately looking at latency of around 600 to 800 milliseconds. But if you go and double that to like 10 seconds, the time doesn't get doubled because it runs in sublinear time. So with 10 seconds, it might take 800 milliseconds up to a second to generate. So the more content you give it, the faster it generates per se. So we recommend this for content that's less than 280 characters or less than a tweet. This is great when you have when you're building things that are games or Alexa skills, etc., where you're trying to get the content immediately for the request and then send it back wherever you need to. And then the third is streaming. So this is recently introduced. And we have a beta going on with this right now with some users. The idea here is that you can generate clips, and the time to first sound is always between 350 to 400 milliseconds, regardless of the length of the audio. So that means, like, because we're generating things faster than real time already, we can guarantee that the first soundbite always comes back to you under 500 milliseconds. And then from there on, we stream the content to you and you play as you go. There are some things that parameters that you can tweak with the streaming, things like what the buffer size is and how much content you want initially for that buffer. But it's a good alternative when you need things that are in your mobile app or where you control the environment. Streaming, unfortunately, at the moment, doesn't work so well with things like Alexa, simply because Alexa doesn't have the APIs to support streaming on their end. So you need to send the entire clip to them. So like with the synchronous API, the streaming API is also recommended for times where you have text that is less than 280 characters or a tweet. And yeah, those are 3 different ways that you can create a clip for different scenarios. When you're creating these clips, the content or the payload that you're sending through can be either text or what is called SSML, which is this markup language. We have an extension of SSML, which introduces a couple of tags that we have that the spec does not have, such as the resemble style tag that you can see here. But the general idea is that through the markup language, you can actually add certain style elements to the audio that you are creating. So for example, the phoneme here, it changes the word world to the pronunciation that is in that phoneme tag. The weird characters you see in that phoneme tag are IPA. I'll point you to the documentation that explains all the tags that we support right after maybe next slide. And then you can also see the resemble style tag here. We'll go through that one as well. Voice creation, really quickly, there's two ways to create a voice. If you were at the webinar last time, we showed you one of these, which was like uploading through the web. The idea is like most of you are familiar with probably going into our website, clicking the record button. We give you prompts to read and you read them out loud. We also provide cloning voices from raw data sources. It's very useful for when you have very targeted domains that you're working with. So for example, if you're working with something that is a game, instead of reading the prompts that we give you, it's better if you just read the script or a script that's more natural to what you actually want to generate. And the second way of building voices is through the API. So the API allows you to programmatically take audio data that you have lying around, format it in one of our supported formats, and then upload it programmatically. The benefit of this is that applications that want to hide Resemble, that don't want your users going to our platform to build voices, are actually able to build voices from their platforms. You have to be approved for this, but it's one of us. If you reach out to one of the our team members, we kind of just go through an approval process, go through what's allowed and what's not, and where we draw the line. But when the dust settles, you're able to use the APIs to actually generate content. So right now, I just kind of want to swap into a little, just going over the documentation itself. Hopefully you can still see the screen. But the API docs are available in app.resemble.ai/docs. They are interactive, which is really neat. And I'll explain what that means, but you'll see here, once you go here and if you're already logged in, it'll put your token in different places where your token belongs. Goes over rate limits, etc. And the nice thing about the documentation here is that's all interactive. So you can go ahead and look at the request here. So you have the three resources: project, clip, voice. You could see the Python code on the right-hand side. You can always see the shell or the curl command if you want to see that instead. And when you click execute, it actually executes that command. What's really nice is if you are using Chrome or Firefox, and if you go into the network tab and you execute these, you can actually see the request going through. We didn't implement this, obviously, this is Chrome. But you can actually copy the request as Node.js if you're working through there, or any of the other options that they have, or get the headers, etc. So because this is happening in your browser, hopefully you can test out the API without actually writing any code. Kind of want to jump into the clip creation process. Again, we outlined 3 different ways of doing it: async, synchronous, and streaming. For the streaming section, we do have a project that you can download and try it out. Again, you do need particular access to this API, but if you're interested, give us a shout. We can work something out there. But the sample project that we do have actually allows you to see how the streaming APIs work and all the different parameters that are there in terms of like the buffer size that you want, all that stuff. So that's there. If I quickly go back up to the synchronous API, you'll see that it's already loaded in with a body, a sample body. Everyone has the exact same sample body with your own voice ID that pre-fills in with, and also a project UUID. So in this case, I've already pre-filled this with a project UUID. I've given it a voice. And if I actually just go ahead and type in a different sentence and click execute, you'll see that it just loads and then it's just generating it on the fly. And you can see it came back, give you the URL. By default, all the assets are hosted on S3. There are ways where you can pass in a parameter called raw, set it to true, and it'll give you back the actual raw audio instead of the file path. In some cases, for lower latencies, that is what is desired. If we play this back.
Welcome to the webinar.
it just says welcome to the webinar like we told it to. So that's the API. They're fairly, again, the docs are fairly interactive, so feel free to play around with these. You can actually make up a lot of your application without writing much code. If you scroll down and you actually look into the phoneme timestamps, there's a few things that we provide here that are very useful. Phoneme timestamps being one of them, the other variables. So phoneme timestamps are interesting if you are doing animation or gaming. By default, with the response that you're getting here, with the audio, we also give you back the phonemes that were used, as well as the timestamps for every phoneme that occurred. So you can see like this phoneme occurs at, ends at this time. And using this information, it's fairly easy for you to create animations or interpolate between one phoneme to another, do facial mapping, all that good stuff. So we actually give you that data back with every request that you send through, unless you specify not to generate it. And then there are variables, very interesting, but I think we went through that last time as well. So we'll skip over that and go down to the voices section. We do have like a blog post on how to create voices through the API. So if you haven't checked that out, we'll put a link somewhere. But generally, again, there's like getting all the voices. But if you scroll down to creating the voices, it's a little bit of a process, but it's, once you do it, it's fairly easy to reproduce again and again. The first step is that you're going to make a request to this voices endpoint to receive a signed URL. The signed URL is going directly to Amazon S3. So we expect you to actually do a put request with that signed URL and with all the headers that were sent back to you from step one, and actually upload your voice. And once you've uploaded it, there's this one more step where you actually trigger the build. The nice thing about having a 3-step process is you can take the exact same voice that you've built here and you can make updates. So if you make a patch request, you can actually update the content of that voice, go back and re-upload, and then call the build step again, and it will rebuild that voice. So this is very useful, for example, if you have a call center and you are collecting more agent information or more agent voice data as you go, you can build your initial agent voice, and then as you're going along, maybe every week, you update that with more data so the voice gets better. In terms of data formats that are supported, both the API and the uploading feature on the website support a single audio file. So what that means is if you have a single speaker recording a file for more than, say, 10 minutes, you can drag and drop that file over to either the API or drag and drop to the web interface, or make a request to the API, and we will do the rest in terms of segmentation and actually building that voice for you. The second method is actually giving us data that's already broken down with the transcript. So the format that we expected in is your folder goes here. Inside this CSV file, you basically have like the file name and then the content of the file in terms of transcript. And then in a waves folder, you have all the wave files. If you upload that folder through the API or through the web interface, it will also build that voice. There's also documentation here for SSML, which goes into basically all the tags that we currently support. It also has like examples of what that, some examples of what that looks like, etc. If you are in the web application, we showed this last time as well, but if you need the payload for the SSML and you're typing stuff out here, you can always click on View SSML and get the payload that you need to send through with the API. So if you do have like a hybrid flow where you have a designer or a script writer that's working on the front end, once there is a developer handoff, it's fairly straightforward to go from one to the other. And that should summarize all of that. So one last thing that we want to show is all of this packed together in a Alexa skill and what that sounds
hey, Albert,
like. So let's take a listen to that.
Hey, Albert, what's the meaning of life?
I was trying to figure that out myself. I don't have an answer, and neither does anyone else.
Hey, Einstein, what's the meaning of life?
What a silly question. The meaning of life is 42.
So clearly Einstein knows the meaning of life. Everyone knows that. It's a simple question. The Alexa skill, we're going to publish this on our GitHub as a repo. So you can check out the code there. It'll be fairly straightforward. One interesting thing about this is we integrated both GPT-3 and our API together. So what you saw there, the responses were automatically, every time I said the exact same question twice, and we passed it through GPT-3, which is a neural network from OpenAI that's able to generate text dynamically. So the response there, the text was generated dynamically, was passed into Resemble. The audio, therefore, was not cached. So it was also generated dynamically and then passed back to the user there. So when you put it all together, if you want an end-to-end dynamic system, it's completely possible. And we kind of wanted to demonstrate that with this Alexa skill. So yeah, we'll have the code up there sometime this week. We'll shoot out an email when this webinar is on YouTube. Hopefully the code will also be live for you to check out. Hopefully the skill will also be live by then. So you can actually open, if you have an Alexa device that is, or if you don't, you can use your mobile phone to actually open our skill and test it out yourself. And that is the end of that tutorial. So perhaps maybe I'll wait a few minutes, take any questions you might have. All right, we'll start off with a couple of questions here. Rohit asks, my question is how to train this API if microphone or recording sound quality is poor. It is happening and the score is 0. So is there a way? Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of different ways. One is you can use, if the browser is giving you trouble, you can always record a file with another software like QuickTime or Audacity, anything you want, and send that over. If that is still noisy because your microphone is poor, there are other tools out there to help with that. Perhaps if your laptop microphone is poor, maybe your phone microphone is better. If the recording quality is poor because the audio is old, so we like with the Einstein audio that you just heard, that's obviously Einstein's been dead for many years. Because the audio quality is poor, we do have in-house methods to actually denoise audio ourselves. So if you do have noisy audio, we can do that. However, you will need to reach out to one of us. All right, Gaurav asks, I recently created a free plan and created my synthetic voice. However, I think it'd be better. Does the paid plan improve the voice? That is true. So the paid plan does a couple of different things. One is it trains it on a slightly different model, but more importantly, it trains it for longer. So because we can offer you more compute time and it gets trained for longer, there's a better chance that it will sound more refined. Also, the free plan only builds the voice once when you record the 50 samples. So if you recorded more than 50 samples, that's not factored into your voice. By default, it actually only trains it once. That is a great note. I did not know. I thought there was a video section that I did already. I'm sorry about that. We'll keep that in mind for next time. Julian. Hi, Julian. Mobile offline, super exciting. We don't have a Flutter SDK. Actually, we don't have any SDKs right now. But we are taking requests for some SDKs. So we've gotten a lot of people to ask about C++ SDKs because they're using Unreal. We do have again, it's not open source yet, but we do plan to open source a Android SDK, but it's written in Java. But yeah, maybe we could add Flutter to the list of clients or SDKs. All right, Greg asks, updating a clip, what can we update? So yeah, when we're talking about updating clips, what you're actually updating is the audio, the amount of audio that you have. So it's useful when you have again, when you have that kind of a call center type approach, but it's useful in any case where you are gathering more data over time. It's also useful if you are collecting different kinds of data. So for example, you might start off with a voice that's very neutral. So think something like Alexa or like, a Siri type voice where it's just narrating content. But then you might want to add, you might want to use the same voice in a game. And you might realize like the initial voice you built performs really poorly in a game because you never gave it the emotion that you might need in a game character. So when you update the voice, you can actually, append it with 5 to 8 minutes of data, which is excited if that's the thing you're going for. And if you combine that data together and re-upload it, it fine-tunes that voice again with the additional data. And therefore the voice will learn an additional emotion or a prosody that it didn't see earlier. So those are the main benefits of updating clip, but in essence, you're updating the data that the voice is built off of. All right, Armin asks, other APIs. So the question is, are there other good APIs apart from GPT-3 that we would recommend for capabilities? Yeah, there are a few. It depends on what you want to do. So GPT-3 is probably the recommended for when you're generating text. I mean, there's also if you don't want to pay OpenAI and you keep it open, you can also use GPT-2. Hugging Face has a great repository with transformers, etc. So that's another text-based API or open source project that you could look into. It's called Transformers by Hugging Face. Another one, if you're going towards the visual side of things, we have a Unity plugin. That's always a good reference if you are trying to animate. It also goes through like how you can use the phoneme timestamps stuff to create like facial animations. But we also recommend a few other partners that might be doing more complicated stuff with facial mapping. So there's obviously there's some common names out there. Synthesia comes to mind. They do things with animating faces and changing or lip syncing rather in real time. So that's a good place to look at. There's also a repository called Wave to Lip. That's WAV2 LIP. It's also fairly recent. It's like a poor man's Synthesia, but it also kind of lets lips. You give it an image or a video and any audio source. So you can generate the audio from us. You give it that audio source, and then it figures out how to do the lip syncing on top of the video. So depending on which direction you want to go in, there's many options out there. Awesome. Next question. Gaurav asks about content that is longer than 280 characters. So say 500 plus words. Can I use Resemble? Yeah, absolutely. So you can use Resemble for long form content. We already have that. The only thing is you can't use the synchronous API. So that has to go in the asynchronous API if you're doing it programmatically, or if you're doing it through the web. The higher plans allow you to add more characters and more words. We do bill in terms of pricing. We do bill in terms of how much usage you have. So depending on how much you use it and number of characters, which could also be written as amount of hours, you get the pricing varies or the cost varies depending on how much you use. But the API, nothing is stopping you from using the API to generate more than 280 characters with the async approach. Yeah. So I guess the last thing here, if anyone has any questions, please enter them. Julian also responds to the question before from Armin. He mentioned a good site called paperswithcode.com. It's a good place to go. He mentioned that there are open source implementations for question answering systems or summarization implementations, etc. Yeah, those are good as well. A lot of those can be found in the Transformers or the Hugging Face APIs or API or Hugging Face repos. But yeah, there are tons of other implementations out there as well. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, everybody. You can always reach out to anyone on our team. You can email team@resemble.ai. You can also hop into our website, use the intercom chat on the bottom left, shoot us a message there as well. Actually, I forgot to scroll. There's a couple more questions that came in. Maybe I'll answer those as well. So Greg asks, and clip, not voice. Yes, so that is a very good point. Both of the update and delete APIs for clips. The question is, like, you can create a clip, but you probably noticed you can't update or delete a clip via the API. Both the delete and update API methods are just undocumented. So we will add documentation for that, which will allow you to update and delete clips via the API. It is implemented, but it's just not documented yet. And a anonymous question here. Can you export audio into any other audio programs like Audition? Yes, so when you generate any audio content, you do have the, on the web, you will have the download button. Through the API, we give you the link to the S3 hosted audio. You can export that and put it into any program. Through the API, you're able to control the sample rate of the audio as well. So depending on what you're doing and where you're putting it, different softwares have different expectation for what the audio needs to be in terms of sample rate. By default on the web, we generate at about 44 kilohertz or 44.1 kilohertz and at about 16 bits. So typically that works with everything, but you shouldn't have a problem exporting any of that audio into any other software. Awesome. And I guess the last question / statement from Greg, if we change the SSML on the site, I cannot get it back via the API. That is interesting. That is a bug. So I think the question might be asking if the SSML is changed on the website, it's not accessible via the API. That is definitely not supposed to happen. And I think we will take a look at that. Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks everyone for joining. Hope this was useful. And if you have any questions that are unanswered, feel free to reach out to the team and we can help you there. Bye, everybody.